Or right out of the box today, right? Because I was super stoked last night, not because of the fact like, oh, it's a road game. Look how well they're playing on the road. It's the preseason. Not because I'm like, man, this guy looks great. Holy cow. Hang the banner. It's the preseason. Not because players that you wanted to see take a step took a step and you're like, this guy's ready to splash into rotation and be a starter for the Pacers. It's the preseason.
Are they hanging a banner for Eastern Conference champs, by the way?
Do they have one for – they do have one for the finals, right? From 2000?
I believe so.
So I would think, right?
Okay.
I haven't heard if there's like an official, ceremony for that. But yesterday and last night, obviously, in watching that game in Minnesota, and there were a lot of things to take away, some of which you take with a grain of salt because it's the preseason. But everything from how are they going to look at the center position to what style of player they're going to play to who's ready to, what's the rotation going to look like. It's the preseason. You don't know for a lot of those things. But nonetheless, it was super fun. It was fun to watch them. The pace they played, they came out and blistered immediately out to 50 points. They were off and running. It was fun. Certain players looked really good. Others are very intriguing. And so I thought we could get into that. Then I thought to myself, you know what, Jake, don't harp too much on that because you have Indiana and Oregon in a top 10 matchup that we could get to. And you have Indiana going into a place where they are the last team that is currently in the Big Ten to actually win at Oregon. I think they might be, they're the last Big Ten team to win at Oregon, and that was like 20-plus years ago with Jerry DiNardo and, just this random game before, of course, they were in the Big Ten. And that's the marquee game of the week, and College Game Day is going to be there. And I thought, okay, that maybe we should go with that. And I thought, it's not a lead topic, but Major League Baseball, I love postseason baseball, and I will admit, and listen, it's been a long time since I've sat down and watched a game like from beginning to end, and you had this weird thing where the Mariners were delayed, and so then they got dispatched to FS2, and like who knows even where that is, and then the Yankees come on, and I'm wearing my Blue Jays hat, and I'm stoked about it, and they're up to a 6-1 lead, and I thought, thank goodness, the Yankees are finally going to be put away, and then it's 6-3, and I say to Shannon, this guy coming to the plate is like the best. There's no way they're going to pitch to him, and they do, and he hits one that I think went darn near over the foul pole. You want to talk about getting out on a pitch, and Aaron Judge does that, and then boom, the roof caves in, and now the Yankees they're like literally Bowser from Super Mario Brothers where you just can't kill them, and they're probably going to come out now and win 2 in a row and eliminate Toronto. And I thought we could talk about that. And then
NHL hockey, Jake, season started last night for the NHL. Don't forget about that.
Listen, I was up all night scouring through my Sabres schedule, trying to figure out number of wins. Sabres and Flames, my two hockey teams. I got push alerts all day. Again, to your point, right? So ton going on, but then all of it goes out the window, as usually is the case because the Colts are the lead topic today. The Colts do we happen to have the breaking news sounder by chance? There's a new linebacker in Indianapolis. I don't know if he has arrived just yet, but Joel A. Erickson going to join us just a couple of minutes from now from West 56th Street. And one of the things that we will discuss, that of the peculiar saga of Jermaine Pratt. A former third-round pick just 6 years ago, he is still yet to hit the age of 30 and has been a really good player predominantly for the Cincinnati Bengals. And then things went awry towards the end in Cincinnati. He requested a trade. He ended up signing as a free agent in I believe he signed as a free agent to the Raiders after the Bengals had released him. And there was a lot of hope and expectation for him in Las Vegas. And this year, through 4 games, he has logged 25 tackles, I think 1 for loss. Jake, you said 4 games. The Raiders have played 5. I understand. The most recent one being here in Indianapolis. And guess who was not here? Jermaine Pratt. Had he been here for that game with the Las Vegas Raiders, he could have actually called up Biff Ward and said, I need a place to live. Because he is signed today, reuniting with Lou Anarumo. That's one of the things that we've seen about Lou Anarumo is, Eddie, you have talked about it, his loyalty to former players, and for that matter, former players' loyalty to him. And this is, if you were to look at the Colts, and you were to say, and there's a lot of discussion out there about, I think there's still nationally in particular, there is still the question, the speculation, the intrigue of, okay, is this for real with Daniel Jones? Are we now seeing, when you look at Daniel Jones and you look at the positive years that he had with the Giants or the positive games that he had with the Giants, he had Saquon Barkley there. And when he had Saquon Barkley, that was when he was taking care of the football and was efficient. And so now are we seeing a rebirth because Jonathan Taylor is filling the role of Saquon Barkley, and you now realize that Giants roster was pretty depleted. And so there has been that topic of discussion from a national standpoint of, is Daniel Jones the guy? Is he for real? Is he this year's Sam Darnold? And then, of course, with Sam Darnold, you saw that midnight came in the Cinderella story right when they got into the postseason, and what does that mean for the Colts? And those are all conversations for other days. But it's the national discussion when it comes to the Colts. One of the things when you talk about Daniel Jones' high level of play, the offensive efficiency of the Indianapolis Colts, Tyler Warren and how he has changed everything, the depletion of the secondary and their necessity of going out and constantly plugging guys in because at no fault of theirs, there's just been unbelievable attrition in that area. And then the trickle, the slight blip now of wake up for Liatu Latu and the leadership of DeForest Buckner. All of those storylines, Shane Steichen calling the right plays, all of those storylines for the Colts have kind of masked the one area that has been deficient. Those things have masked the one area aside from, and again, I realize the defensive backfield is an area of not weakness per se because you get a pass there because it's not really their fault. It's not like they went out and signed, it's not like Cam Ward's not a good player, right? Or excuse me, Moody Ward. It's not like he's and Cam Bynum. It's not like they're not good players. They signed good players, but they've just been riddled by injury. Linebacker is the area, Eddie, would you agree that if you were to look at the Colts right now, the one area where their play has probably been subpar that needs to be bolstered is that of linebacker?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you just go back to that Raiders game, and Joe Bacci had one of the worst performances by a linebacker I've seen in a Colts uniform in quite some time. And it started from the very first play that the Raiders were on offense. They got Ashton Genty on a wheel route. They got him one-on-one with Joe Bacci. Beats Joe Bacci, and then there are at least two plays that I can remember. There was a defensive penalty by Joe Bacci. Actually, there was one play where he committed 2 different penalties on the same play. Committed pass interference.
He definitely struggled. And he was tripping. Like one of the big, and that's why, to go back to last night with the Pacer game, Joe Bacci was one of the stars in the preseason, right?
And he just went on injured reserve.
That just came out?
Yeah.
This is one of the things that we can talk about with Joel in just about 5 minutes because he's out there, Joel A. Erickson. Do you happen to have the breaking news, Sander? Did you say we have breaking news from the Colts linebacker room, Eddie?
Yes, Joe Bacci has been placed on injured reserve.
So that, obviously, here I was saying that it was Bacci probably was the reason why you go out and you sign Jermaine Pratt, and lo and behold, yes, that was the reason, but not for the exact specification by which we said.
I'm fascinated to find out what the injury is, though, Jake, because I don't think he left that game early against Vegas. I don't think he left the game at all with an injury. So is it something that was sustained recently, or is it just a quote-unquote phantom injury? That you see that from time to time in Major League Baseball.
Now, there are a couple of injury updates to be given in regards to the Colts today from Shane Steichen. For example, Alec Pierce will practice today, but he is still in concussion protocol. Kenny Moore will work out, and Grover Stewart also will practice today. As for Alec Pierce and now wait a minute, Jake, you just said he's practicing, but he's still in protocol. How does that happen? The concussion protocol is listen, it varies from player to player. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a neurologist. I had to visit one monthly when I was a kid, but I'm not a neurologist. But I do believe that, concussions are one that you just don't know from one player to the next. And I'm not making light of the concussion protocol at all. Ralph Reif is going to join us coming up today on the program in the 1 o'clock hour and can give better indication as to what things they may be looking for and what things may resurface. So in other words, is it possible when you're in concussion protocol like an Alec Pierce where you are trending in the right direction and then at the 11th hour something else comes up where that then takes you backwards just when you're about to leave the protocol back into it again. We saw it last week. Are we possibly going to see that this week, and what sort of things will they be looking for to make sure that he is good to go? And we will ask Ralph about that coming up on the program today. Also on the show today, I mentioned Joel Erickson going to join us momentarily. Pat Boylan talking a little bit of Pacers, and then did you say Matt Taylor today? He usually does Thursday.
Yes, he is going today because he has to go speak to a class tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah, he's, preference. He's talking to kids over talking to us, Jake.
Kids or college kids? Do we know?
I believe college.
Do we know what school he's speaking to?
He would not tell me.
I'll be honest. When
he is a proud Franklin College alum,
I knew that.
Wonder if it's Franklin
College. When we
are
invited, and I'm always happy to do it, to speak to, I do feel bad because of, when I go to talk to college kids or high school kids that want to get into broadcasting, I'm always appreciative of that. But I never know, Eddie, like what to tell them in terms. It's just it's such an unconventional. Getting a job and keeping a job within this line of work is kind of like the NFL concussion protocol. There's just it is different for every person, and the route is different, the path is different, the navigation, all of it. And we have seen players in the past in Indianapolis that were concussion prone that then were right back on the field, 2 weeks later, and seemingly they played through a lot of them. Then there were other players that there were one or two of them, and you're like, man, and I think concussions also can kind of compound, and then you have to keep that in mind as well. But we'll ask Joel about all of it coming up just a couple of minutes. Did you watch the baseball playoffs last night, Eddie, or did you watch the Pacer game, or did you flip back and forth?
I was here doing the Pacer game, so that was my main.
I forgot you're doing even for the preseason, right?
Yes, sir. Or, sir, I say yes, sirs.
Well played.
Thank you.
I thought last night, and this happens every year, like Ray J. Dennis looked really good last night, right? But then you're like, okay, it's the preseason. Who knows? And who knows how many opportunities he's even going to get in the regular season. Of the players that we anticipate are going to be regularly in rotation, there was one last night that I thought looked really good. Would you like to guess who I'm talking about? I thought this particular player, again, it's the preseason, but there has been enough introduction of skill set that you know what this player theoretically can do. It was a matter of being able to show a comfort level more than an aptitude. I think I've mentioned before in basketball, when I would play, like when I was in high school, for example, and would play basketball, and I'd play an open gym and I would play up. In other words, instead of playing now with the JV guys, I'm playing with the varsity guys. I always knew what it was I needed to do. I always knew how to do it, but I always felt like my brain, I was so eager to do it that I was moving faster than the game itself, and that would lead to turnovers or a sloppy pass or whatever, and I never looked nor felt totally comfortable playing up. And there is one player that, to me, clearly has skill set, clearly has understanding of how to do things, but for a lot of time in the NBA, looks like a young player that's playing up and is moving faster. The feet are moving faster. Matter of fact, I remember asking this player if this assessment made sense, and the answer from the player was, that is a question that would be asked by somebody who was a baller, meaning not that I was a great player, but who has played basketball, because I think this person was in agreement. And then last night, it looked like everything slowed down. It's one game. It's preseason. But it looked like everything was slowing down, and I'm like, okay, I like what I'm seeing here. Who am I talking about?
You're talking about Jarris Walker.
Bingo.
Only concern that I had is that he was still playing late into that game.
So what's that?
He was playing late into that game. Like, he was playing in overtime.
Understood. Yeah. In other words, at the time where your regular rotational guys should be out at Chicago's Pizza, right?
Yeah. Or like the Minnesota guys in their street clothes. Did you see that? They played the Pacers did the same thing, but the Minnesota players went into the locker room and changed into the clothes they arrived into the game and were in their street clothes in the second half.
Do you think they showered?
That's a great question.
Wouldn't you go and shower before you put on your street clothes?
That's a great question.
I mean, I would think. If you were an NBA player and you had to sit on the sidelines, what would you wear? Like, would you just get like what you're wearing to the club, or would you get dressed up like you're going into? And I realize work is the NBA for them, but
I would probably have a fashion of like a TJ McConnell.
I don't remember what McConnell typically wears because he usually is on the floor.
It's not flashy. It's just like almost everyday clothing, like jeans and like a cool shirt or something like that.
Fair enough.
Or Aaron Nesmith, not too flashy either.
Fair enough.
Nothing like a Tyrese Halliburton,
The Colts getting set for this game with Arizona. When I look at, and I've completely shifted on this, and it's a theme that you're probably going to hear me say almost daily because that's the reality of what happens at this point, right? When you get out to this kind of a start. When you look at the Colts and the way that they've started, you have shifted now from where are we going to find the wins to where are the losses going to come? Because if they're playing at this level, and I think a big part of it, we could probably do daily shows forever just on the Freudian nature of the wavelength connection between Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen. And that's not to say that Steichen could not possibly have that with all quarterbacks. But I think when Daniel Jones was selected as the starter, we now can really see the fruits of the labor of this is because it's the quarterback that Steichen felt the most comfortable being able to almost conservatively call a game with that quarterback, but then open it up when he needs to, as opposed to opening up an offense and then being conservative when you need to. And that's allowed them to take care of the football. That's allowed them to possess clock, and that's allowed them to spread the love around and become one of the most balanced and yet unpredictable offenses in the National Football League. And I don't know, nor will I, maybe will we ever know. If you go back all the way back, was Eric Coryell with Don Coryell a great offense because he called it masterfully and had a conditioned system masterfully that Dan Fouts was able to just go and play? Or was Dan Fouts so good that it made Don Coryell look like an offensive genius in this air attack that they put in? The same thing with Marino, the same thing then with Michael Vick, the same thing with Peyton Manning, the same thing with Cam Newton. Is it the quarterback that is the system and the coach is the beneficiary of that? And in this case, I think it's a little of both, Eddie. I think it's like a 50-50 thing where Steichen, we know, was brought in here to be a quarterback whisperer, but he was brought in to be a quarterback whisperer, I think, that also himself, and this is what we have overlooked. We talked so much and we emphasized so much and we hounded so much on the fact that Anthony Richardson needed to grow on the job, needed to grow into the role, and what we probably overlooked is that he who needed to grow into the role as well was Shane Steichen. And Steichen needed to be able to see and analyze. And yes, I know he was the guy that awakened Jalen Hurts, and I know that he was the guy, but he wasn't the head coach who had a bunch of things to oversee that was also then maintaining and running and working with the quarterback on the offense and all of those things. And yes, there are still critiques that can be made. Why did he discipline A.D. Mitchell for a violation by which Jonathan Taylor seemed to get a pass? Is that because of preferential treatment based on production, or is that a coach who is growing into and more confident in a disciplinary role that he didn't feel comfortable having as a younger guy? I don't know the answer to that. But I also think that what we are seeing now is a guy that is more experienced and just has a better idea of what he wants to call and how he wants a game flow to operate, and he has the quarterback that is allowing him to do that. Now, is Daniel Jones going to keep up this ride all year long? That obviously is going to be the biggest storyline for the Colts over the course of the season. And there is some truth to, I could see, for example, can you imagine if it comes out this way, and people probably will have pitchforks on me if this happens, but like last year, Sam Darnold had this bounce back year, right? That was the blueprint. Sam Darnold, if you can get that kind of play out of any quarterback, no matter who you are, the Raiders were hoping for that out of Geno Smith, right? The Bucs already had gotten it out of Baker Mayfield, where you just want that quarterback that, okay, now that we've got things around him, and let's not worry about what the resume said beforehand. Darnold had that a year ago, and they were really good over the course of the regular season, and then you kind of knew that in the postseason that reality was kind of going to strike, and it did. And Darnold's not a bad player, but he's not an elite player, I don't think. At times last year, he looked elite. Eddie, I hope this isn't the case. But is it possible that the Colts have a year where they have a quarterback that plays at a really high level over the course of the year? We used to call it he's treeing. He's in the zone. He's at this higher level than reality. And then the Colts get into the postseason. They win the division. And one of those teams, like a Baltimore or a Cincinnati, that's been injured, that's had a bad year, all of a sudden when nobody's looking, and the Bengals typically do this, in the last quarter of the season, they start to get healthy. They start playing really well. They win 3 of 4. They kind of stumble their way into the postseason. And now all of a sudden, even though you get in as a divisional winner, you are facing a team that is hot and that is healthy, and thus that clock is at like 11:58. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I don't think it can be ruled out because, like concussion protocol, things still, I think, are in an ebb and flow where you can take a step forward, maybe a half a step back, then 2 steps forward. And so far, it's been mostly forward for the Colts, and that's the good news. Did you say we got a hold of Joel, Eddie?
Yeah, that was my fault. I was over here working, and I just literally lost track of time.
Okay.
If we break now, Jake, we can get him for like 5 minutes.
All right, Joel Erickson next. Okay, Eddie forgot to call Joel Erickson, and now we have like 4 minutes to talk to him, so I've got to talk really fast like an auctioneer, so let's bring him on right now. He is on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, Joel Erickson of the Indianapolis Star. And, Joel, we have decided due to his blunder that Eddie is getting the Joe Bocci treatment. He's going on IR. We're not going to hear from him for a while. What happened here with Joe Bocci, first off, and the decision to bring in Jermaine Pratt?
You know, that's interesting because I don't – we were just talking about this in the media room. We don't actually know what Bocci's dealing with. He played a smaller complement of snaps on Sunday, but all we really saw was, some of his mistakes. They never announced an injury. There's not one listed in this thing. So it's a little bit of a surprise that they placed him on IR.
Now, when they placed him on IR, and pardon my ignorance here, Joel, this was because I know, isn't there like a 4-week IR and then there's like the out for the year IR? Do we know what this is?
Well, any player who gets placed on IR during the season can come back after a minimum of 4 weeks.
I thought it was 4, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the one where you get placed on and you're on just season-ending IR, that's if it happens before they get to 53-man roster.
The Jermaine Pratt signing is curious because he is still a young player. He is familiar with Lou Anarumo and vice versa. He was a third-round pick out of Cincinnati, and then he went to Vegas where he did not make the trip here. He had 25 tackles with the Raiders, and then Pete Carroll just simply said they wanted to go in another direction. Have you had a chance to kind of find out what went down there? Maybe I should text JT the Brick and ask him. Is this a case of a player slowing down or a player that just wasn't a fit?
His numbers seem fine. Even his coverage numbers, like Next Gen Stats has him as giving up 7 completions in 13 attempts when he's the nearest defender. That's way better than honestly any of the Colts linebackers so far. So it is a little bit of a puzzle, and I tried to kind of find out some stuff right before Shane walked in. And it seemed like Raiders people are a little bit confused as to why that happened too. So I don't know if it was a coaching disagreement type thing. It's a little bit of an odd release based on what I was able to read.
Joel, when you go home, Joel Erickson is our guest from the Indianapolis Star. When you go home at the end of the day and you're relaxing with one of the goods from the beer ferry that has been brought to you, and you think to yourself, I do a number of these interviews and I talk to my editors. And the storyline around the Colts so far this year that I'm kind of surprised more people have not asked me about or that we have not made more of is what?
The offensive line. I kind of think that the offensive line is always going to get a little bit less. It's always going to get a little bit less just because it's the offensive line and people don't like to talk about blocking. But I know on Sunday I wrote something that essentially was about how Braden Smith and the Colts are Max Crosby's kryptonite, and it came up again, and no one read it. No one paid attention to it. But if you think about where this line was, they have 2 guys who are in their first years as full-time starters. They have Braden Smith coming off of a very difficult personal battle with mental illness, and that was a lot of uncertainty coming into the year. And they've been incredible. They've given up 4 sacks. And Jonathan Taylor leads the league in rushing.
The thing about an offensive line as well, Joel, that I've always felt, and I've mentioned this before, they have really good players on it, don't get me wrong, but I just think that on offensive line, so much of that is cohesiveness of guys being familiar with who's around them, right? And, considering that at the center position, you've got a new face there, but other than that, you have familiarity. And to me, that is what goes such a long way in terms of the stability of a line, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tony Sperano probably deserves a ton of credit for making it that way. It feels like they've been a fairly cohesive. Like even last year when they had struggles, it didn't feel like it was communication type stuff. It felt like they've got a hole at right guard and they're trying to find a way to fill it and they can't do it. This year they've had everybody healthy for the most part. And I do think Sperano does a really, really good job of helping that cohesiveness that you're talking about.
If Kenny Moore can't suit up on Sunday, who gets the Trey McBride assignment?
I like the idea of using Cam Bynum in these situations with the tight ends, but it's a little bit hard because then you don't have the free safety. So it's kind of a mixed thing there. And I do think they might be getting close to opening this locker room here. I'm not sure. Looking through the window, trying to figure it out.
So, Joel, here's the thing. Since we're going to let you go, and you can't see this, but I'm going to have Eddie narrate it. In conclusion, and I did this just for you because, before I knew that Eddie was going to screw this all up and we were only going to have 2 minutes with you, and I thought we were going to have a full conversation. I thought we'd have fun with it. And look, first time I'm wearing them too. Now, I'm doing this for the YouTube audience. Eddie, I'd like you to commentate. I'm going to lift up so people can see my socks.
He's lifting up his legs. I can't see. He's wearing the Milwaukee
Eddie.
Brewers socks.
Hell yeah.
Oh, Jake.
Is the champagne on ice tonight? Is it ready, Joel, at the Erickson household?
It's not ready, but I would really like to be out of the series tonight. Yes.
My entire family are Cubs fans. I have nothing against the Cubs nor the Brewers, but when I was in Milwaukee and I inadvertently ended up sitting in the seat that was reserved for Bob Uecker and didn't realize why it was open, I went and bought a pair of socks for the Brewers, and I'm wearing them now. So with that, we'll let you get into the locker room, and thank you for the abbreviated conversation and for talking fast.
You bet, guys. We'll see
Appreciate
you later.
it. Joel A. Erickson joining us. Put my shoe back on from the Indianapolis Star. By the way, he was on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. You've heard me mention it, javahouse.com. If you would like to enjoy the instant peel and pour pods of whether it be the coffee, but also keep in mind the Arctic Freeze, which is essentially their hydration drink. It is Liquid Science Hydration. Got it right here. Wrangler Energy as well. All of their variations. Jake 25% off at javahouse.com for your first purchase. 25% off. It is fabulous. The bocce thing is interesting, Eddie, because of the fact that we don't know what it is, right, in terms of the IR, and maybe that we'll finally get clarification on that today. But that news, if you're just joining us, coming out earlier today, Joe Bocce, the linebacker for the Colts, has been placed on injured reserve. That clears room. And when you first saw that they were signing Jermaine Pratt, you thought to yourself, okay, this is depth at the linebacker spot. Well, it's not necessarily depth, it's replacement, right? But it is replacing a position, and Joe Bocce played really well through camp. He had a really good camp. He had
a solid camp, but it was one of those donut tire analogies here, Jake.
Yep.
Because he's a solid guy if you need him for one game or two, but the fact that it went on for 3 weeks into 4 weeks, you started to see why he was not a starter prior to being with the Colts.
I think that's one of the things that I have always felt about fantasy football. Fantasy football really has done, in my opinion, 3 things in becoming the NFL needed no help in its popularity. But fantasy football was, in my opinion, a catalyst in catapulting it in 3 areas. Number 1, people that were not regular NFL fans, but were either friends with, spouses with, coworkers with, whatever people that were. And I'm talking about 20 years ago, at this point, 30 years ago, when fantasy football first really hit the scene. So probably 30 years ago. You had people that were casual football fans, but they're like, you know what? I want to beat my husband. I want to beat my coworker. I want to beat my, whatever. In fantasy football.
I want to be Nate from Chicago's Pizza.
Yeah, who's undefeated, right?
I know.
So you had, therefore, individuals that were signing up for fantasy football just to give themselves reason to follow the game, and then they became very engrossed in it, okay? That's like group number, the first thing that it did. It got people involved that normally would not, okay? The second thing it did, people that were already fans of the NFL, but they were a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles. They were a fan of the Indianapolis Colts. They were a fan of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, all of a sudden, they had reason to watch the Atlanta Falcons Denver Broncos game because they're like, oh, I've got the tight end on that. So people were now given motivation to watch each and every game. The third thing that fantasy football did is I think it allowed, on a very elementary level, but it allowed for fans to understand the complexities of building a roster, frankly, and navigating through 2 things. Injury, number 1, and then number 2, falling in love with and getting mesmerized by who somebody was versus who they are. DeAndre Hopkins is a good example. Right now in fantasy football, DeAndre Hopkins in most leagues is probably available as a free agent. And somebody's like, man, I'm down 3 receivers. I've got a bye week, and my main 2 receivers are hurt. I don't know what I'm going to get from them this week. Let me see if I can pick up a receiver this week. And they scour and like, oh, gosh, DeAndre Hopkins, slam dunk, that guy's a beast. Well, he's a beast in 2021. And I think we at times look at somebody and we fall in love with what they once were. And, you know, Joe Bocci is one. Not that he was ever confused with Mike Singletary. But he is a player that you look at, and when he was going through camp and he was familiar with the system, and so you're like, okay, this guy can play. You plug, and I think the Colts did that to an extent. You plug him in, and then you find out, okay, there's limitation here. And then you have injury that comes into play, and you've got to scour the wire. I mean, you see it gives you indication and appreciation for the challenge of what these teams go through. Last night, Pacers were in action. Pat Boylan going to join us. Pat's at what time, Eddie?
20 minutes from now, Jake.
Did you make yourself a Post-it note on this one?
Thank you for that.
Pat Boylan in 20 we will get to. When we come back.
And also, I'm offended that you would compare me to Joe Bocci. I'm like Jonathan Taylor. I make one mistake and I should be forgiven instantly.
Hold on. No.
I'm the superstar here.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you opportunity for retribution.
I make this dog and pony show run.
Okay. Now, who's the dog and who's the pony? Listen, I'm going to give you a chance, Eddie, at redemption and retribution, because I am going to give you an observation and then ask you if whether or not I'm an old man yelling at clouds or it's a fair assessment of what we're seeing today.
Can I go ahead and just say old man yelling at clouds?
Wait on it, because I'll do it next. About 12 minutes from now, again, if you're just joining us, Jermaine Pratt has been signed by the Colts at the linebacker position. Joe Bocci has gone onto the IR. Alec Pierce practicing today, but staying in concussion protocol. Kenny Moore, Grover Stewart expected to work out today. Okay.
Eddie Garrison forgot to call Jolie Erickson at 12:15.
Eddie Garrison's on injured reserve. Here is my...
Oh, another one that came out just right after we went to break. Kyler Murray not practicing today for Arizona. He left that game briefly on Sunday against Tennessee with a foot injury. He did come back, but it was pretty obvious that his mobility was a little compromised. So,
and I can't recall, didn't we look up who their backup is? Is Jacoby Brissett in Arizona?
It is. Yeah. Jacoby Brissett, yes.
So we'll keep an eye on that as the Colts and Cards this weekend at Lucas Oil. Okay, here's something that every once in a while, these brain droppings come my way, okay? And I ask, and I know people are like, dude, this is a sports show. I turn on, listen, we talk plenty of sports, I realize. I'm simply curious, and I'm going to offer right up front, and you can always text the show at 317-239-1070. The hard thing about that is, I try to get to that, but it's hard sometimes to do radio and watch that as it's coming in. The same holds true with my personal cell phone number, but then later I can go back and read text messages on my phone. My personal number is 317-523-9288. So I will allow allow's the wrong word, but everybody here can be the jury and tell me if I am, because I'm worried sometimes that I'm going to feel like too old, right? So, Eddie, I will also allow you, and let me finish with my whole narrative here before you then judge whether or not you think I'm totally out of my mind, off base, whatever. Over the last month or so, I have become more aware of something, and I've noticed it, and I've said to Shannon, the other day we were out, and we're sitting there at a table, and I said, look around. She looked around, and there were 3 different tables near us. One had 4 people at it, one had 3, and one had 2. I kid you not. I know that sounds preposterous and made up, whatever. 9 people over the course of 3 tables. And all of them were, when I say younger people, I mean probably a combination of like late high school into mid-20s.
College students, potentially?
Of that age range, okay? But more probably young professionals. But when I was in high school and college, and and just when I was coming of age with my buddies, one of our favorite things to do, we would go to the Steak and Shake at 86th and Westfield, and we'd all get, I could still tell you what everybody would order. And then we'd sit around for an hour and a half, and I mean, we were there forever, or Burger King or whatever. And we're cutting it up, and we're joking with each other, and we're making fun of each other. And one day you're busting a guy's chops, and the next day he's busting your chops, and whatever. And it was all just part of our group and part of our coming of age. And listen, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. I just mentioned my cell phone number for people to text me, and I enjoy interacting with people back. I enjoy when they call me and I talk to them. All of that, right? And I, like many, I'm always looking at my phone on social media and websites and all of those things, as much as anybody else. So I'm putting myself in the same category here to an extent. When I said to Shannon, I go, look around. There was a table of 4 people, a table of 3 people, and a table of 2 people. All 9 people had on full, and I don't mean like earbuds, I mean over-the-ear, earmuff level headphones plugged into a device. I think 7 of the 9 were plugged into a laptop, 2 of them were plugged into a phone. And I understand they may have been watching this was over the weekend, but they could have been watching a lecture, they could have been, who knows?
A Zoom call or a Teams call?
Any of that. I get it. But here is my thing. While I admittedly am victim to this as well, I don't know to this extent. My question is this. I won't be around to see it. But are we now, as a society, programming and conditioning young people, a generation of people? And I know, you go back to when I'm sure there are probably in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. There were probably people that on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria were like, I'm on this ship because I want to get away from the generation behind us that are clueless.
You're on the what?
I get it. This has been ship, boat. This has been a theme amongst humanity since the beginning of time. And I won't be around in 35, 40 years, but I'm genuinely curious of this. Are we as a society and as a people conditioning an entire generation that are losing the art of interpersonal communication?
Yes.
And by that, I mean, are we about to see in 30 years a decline in marriage, a decline in interpersonal communication and conflict resolution? Are we conditioning people to not understand the art of being able to read body language, read facial expression, read temper and cadence of people when they speak, know when people are joking, know when they're not, know when they are hurt, know when they are happy, all of those things, because of the fact that we now are having people that are sitting directly across from somebody, and instead of talking to them, they are either A, texting to them literally from across the room, or B, instead of being observant of and soaking in and embracing the atmosphere with which they are currently sitting, they are locked into watching people doing the exact same thing in Stockholm, Sweden, because it's an Instagram page that they follow and they'd rather be there because that's where everything looks exciting. That's where everything looks fun. And what worries me is that oftentimes when you are watching these things, when you are consumed by these things, you are then looking at social media, for example, which now has become this cesspool of divisiveness that is nothing but videos and narratives of people not enjoying one another, but rather fighting with one another. Look at this video of this Karen at Wendy's. Look at the video of this guy that didn't return his cart at Target. Look at all of these things of people that are screaming, arguing, dividing one another. But in addition to that, people that are now so reliant upon their device that they are completely defiant to the actual interpersonal communication of simply laughter, joking, all of those things that we as a people have become so obviously the one thing that the common bond we had for the last since the beginning of time is the fact that we were forced to communicate with one another. And now communication is nonverbal and non-direct. And I am genuinely curious. I won't be here for it, but I'm genuinely curious what our existence is going to look like from a humanitarian level in 40 or 50 years. Now, having said all of that in a very expedited and elementary level, my question is, do I sound like the biggest overthinking old person moron on the planet, or is this an observation that other people have also had and a curiosity or concern that they also have thought of?
Yeah, it's a fair concern. It's a fair observation, Jake, and I think it's only going to get worse, too, with the integration of AI, because now you can have a
and you don't know what's real, right?
You can have not even that, like just the aspect that you can have a one-to-one conversation now with AI. Like I can go on to Snapchat and have a conversation with an AI person. With AI, I can have a full-on blown conversation on Saturday.
Well, the other thing too that is rapidly becoming an issue is, now when you see. And you can go into the whole thing of algorithms and the way that is forcing people to think one way versus another, or think that they're, all of those things. But in addition to that, now the ability for a storyline, a news story, or just a human's interaction to be manipulated by something that in reality isn't even real. I mean, the number of videos that you see of somebody saying something, you're like, I can't believe that person said that. And they're like, no, dude, that's not even real. That's AI. It's crazy. Anyway, off my soapbox, back to the Pacers last night. There were several things that I really liked, but was perhaps I so intrigued by the things that I liked that, kind of like what I was just saying, I overlooked the things that I should have been noticing that were of concern heading into the Pacers season. One preseason game, but we're going to discuss it and break it down with Pat Boylan next. Rolling along on a Wednesday. It is a beautiful day outside, by the way. If you're just joining us, there is plenty to get to in terms of the Colts. For example,
And NFL for that matter as well.
Jermaine Pratt is the newest member of the Colts at the linebacker spot. Former third-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, played for Lou Anarumo. And then, after requesting a trade from Cincinnati, was signed as a free, I believe he was signed as a free agent with the Raiders and played there for 4 games. Not sure exactly what took place. He had 25 tackles, played pretty well, I thought, for them, but did not make the trip to take on the Colts. But had he made the trip, as I mentioned earlier, he just could have said, well, I'm just going to stay there, because the Colts signed him today. The Raiders had released him, Pete Carroll saying they wanted to go in another direction. And when he was signed, it seemed peculiar at first until you realize that Joe Bacci, the linebacker for the Colts, has gone on to injured reserve. So that created a spot there. At the wide receiver position for the Colts, Alec Pierce is going to practice today, but he is still in concussion protocol. Ralph Reif, about 25 minutes from now, can shed a little light on what exactly that may mean. But Pierce is clearly a versatile weapon for Shane Steichen and for Daniel Jones' offense. Did not, and this happened last week, he was progressing towards returning from concussion protocol when then he was relegated back into the protocol and did not play against the Raiders. So we shall see what does happen with Alec Pierce. As for the others that we've been monitoring, Kenny Moore is working out today, so too Grover Stewart is working out today. So that's where things stand for the Colts. Kyler Murray not practicing for the Cardinals. Arizona will be the team that comes into Lucas Oil Stadium coming up this Sunday. He has a boo-boo on his foot, right?
Foot injury. Jonathan Gannon, head coach of the Cardinals, said he is day-to-day.
Aren't we all?
And then yesterday, the Bengals traded for Joe Flacco. He will be starting this week against Green Bay. Zach Taylor just announced.
It's a rough day if your name is Jake. If you're Jake Browning, you lost your gig to Joe Flacco, who's a senior citizen. And if you're me, you're doing the show and Eddie forgets to call people, right? So it's. I like the Fever shirt you have on there.
Thanks.
It's a nice shirt.
Thanks for the backhanded compliment.
Listen, you gave me permission. You said, we went to the break and you said, you know what, Jake, you have 1 hour. You have 1 hour to be able to get this all out of your system. And but you did call Pat Boylan, right?
I did, and then he didn't answer, and then I had to text him to say, hey, I'm calling you.
Look at you
and
being
he goes,
so thorough.
Oh, bleep. Call me back, please.
What's the first letter of the word that he used?
S.
Okay. He joins us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. He is, of course, Pat Boylan, that you hear not only doing television for the Indiana Fever in their remarkable season, but on the radio network for the Indiana Pacers as well. Pat, I'll begin with this. Last night against Minnesota, I thought there were several things that jumped out at me, but you see them with a much more probably trained eye than myself. What jumped out at you last night, first and foremost, about the 2025-2026 Indiana Pacers?
Well, first of all, allow me to defend myself, even though I know this isn't the most scintillating radio. The number that usually calls me, Eddie dialed in on a different number. So,
and listen, I'm with you there, because I don't know about you, Pat, but what we were going to do was call you to tell you a couple of things. Number one, that you right now you have a week left to call about your tax lien that's out on you. And also, if you want a new car warranty, we can get that taken care of. A new health insurance that we can get you signed up for. Those are the three things that we were going to call from the unknown number, which is why you probably declined, right?
Well, sadly, that's exactly correct. You get so many spam calls these days that if you don't recognize the number, you just let it go. But I probably should have also realized that it was 1 o'clock, but time flies.
Do you know I have, by the way, have you ever eaten spam?
I actually don't think I have, unless it was one of those, like, fancy attempt at a spam dish at, like, a nicer restaurant, but right. I don't think I have.
I have a friend, I kid you not, there's a spam museum. I kid you not. I have a friend that went to the spam museum at Hormel, I think is the company that makes it, and they've got, like, the years of spam and all that kind of thing. And the one thing I told them when they went in and bought their tickets, I said, I am praying you didn't give me your email, because that would have been a complete disaster, right? Am I right?
Very well played. There's no worse than spam.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Okay, so what jumped out at you last night?
Gosh, I think a few things, just the up and down nature of the game, which I think you tend to expect in the preseason, but it was really up and down. I mean, the Pacers were playing at a fast pace, but also that, they got up by 24, lost the lead, went to overtime, won in overtime. I thought it was a really good opportunity for some of those guys that, frankly might be playing on the boom by the time things are all said and done. But a good opportunity for them to get some extra minutes and in those crunch time situations, even though preseason overtime is not always what jumps out at you. I thought Jarris Walker, got not only some good minutes, but showed some nice things as well. And I think the portions of the game where you saw the starters on the floor, I think you had to be pretty happy with. Now, unfortunately, Isaiah Jackson picked up a couple of fouls early, didn't play very much. I'm not a big plus-minus guy in individual games at all, in fact, but when you can look at units and you see all of a unit with kind of the same numbers, I think that stands out. And to me, the pace of play that the starters were playing with seemed to be about what you would have expected with Tyrese Halliburton out there, so we'll see if that sticks. But also, just that group as a whole, the other four starters besides Jackson were all plus double digits, and they're obviously going against the starters for Minnesota for a good portion of that time. So, just one game, just one preseason game, albeit, but those are probably the things that stood out the most to me.
Pat, let me share with you one thing that I saw, and then feel free to tell me that I'm being too nuanced here, okay? Or if you noticed it. I was very curious about the center position for Indiana and replacing Miles Turner. And yes, it's one preseason game, and one preseason game does not, even a two-season preseason schedule make. But while I love Isaiah Jackson, and I love him, I think he's athletic, he's bouncy, we'll see how the Achilles is. James Wiseman showed promise last year before he got hurt through preseason and that kind of thing. I didn't know a lot about Jay Huff. What I noticed about Jay Huff that to me I really liked, he seems to have, Miles Turner was such a good top-of-the-key facilitator in terms of their offense by being your entry-level passing point to getting that offense going and getting that kind of weave going. And I thought Turner's ability, vision, passing, etc., facilitated that in so many different possessions. Jay Huff, to me, from the very limited time that I saw him, appeared to have a very similar skill set in terms of passing and vision facilitation. Am I giving him way too much credit and way too small a sample size?
No, I don't think so, although with the obvious disclaimer that you just gave, it is one preseason game, and oftentimes you need a couple of regular season months to get a real feel for a guy. But it's all we have right now. It's all we have to talk about, and he's a new guy. And, it's interesting to me. First of all, I agree with that. I think he does a lot of the things Miles Turner does well, which is, it's kind of funny. You look at those two, and you don't necessarily immediately assume they have the same skill sets, but Jay Huff, the fascinating thing to me about Jay Huff is if you look at what he did, last year especially, really efficient numbers, kind of an analytics whiz kid, but there's this huge which is he just didn't play a ton of minutes. He did all of those in 11, 12, 13 minutes per game, somewhere around that number. So can he take those numbers, and if he is going to get more minutes, which the center position I think is the most interesting position battle the Pacers have had in a preseason in quite some time, if you take those minutes and if he's able to play 25, can he still do those same things? And if so, you maybe really have something there. And the point is nuanced, but I think it's interesting for discussion at bare minimum, and I would agree with you in the 19 minutes that he played last night. I thought he was a pretty good facilitator and maybe a little bit better than I realized. You'll want to see more games to continue to have that opinion. And I think that's an interesting point about Turner, too, because I'm not sure that's one of the first few things that would have jumped out to, the average fan about what Miles Turner does well. But I do think he found a good niche in that role, especially with Tyrese Halliburton and, the dribble handoffs or the pitch handoffs that the Pacers like to run. So, there may be something there. And with him and the whole center position as a whole, I was looking this up yesterday. Roy Hibbert's first year and Miles Turner's first year, each of those guys started about half of the season. And if you take those years away, or even if you include them, the Pacers have had remarkable stability at starting center for 17 years now. That's with those rookie years included. So for the first time in a very, very long time, there's a position battle at starting center. And, I really like Isaiah Jackson too. I think he's a fantastic prospect. I think, from a physicality standpoint, just physical skills set, he's, about what you would work up in a lab. And so I hope that he's somebody that, wins that job, because I think he has the highest ceiling. That said, I think Jay Huff might be your most solid guy and your most dependable guy right now, and I thought he showed it in those 19 minutes last night.
I thought last night, Pat Boylan is our guest. He's on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. I thought last night, Pat, that Jarris Walker notably, and he started to show this last year. It was part of the real, I mean, aside from the obvious, with his injury, one of the real disappointments was it was right when I thought the game started to really slow down for him on a nightly basis, and he was able to just kind of play his game. I thought last night he looked as comfortable and as in the flow of what they wanted to do as anybody. Did you observe the same?
Yes, I did. And I'll give Tony East some credit here. I believe it was Tony who asked the question on Media Day, but it was one of those that kind of made a lot of sense to me the way he asked it, and Jarris Walker answered it in a way where he very much agreed with it. And paraphrasing here, but Tony has something along the lines of, you'll hear players say, and I think Tyrese Halliburton had referenced this, experiencing the same kind of phenomenon in his career, that oftentimes going into your second year, you think you have things figured out, and it's not until your third year when you look back at your second year and realize, wait, no, I didn't, but now I really kind of do. At least for the players that progress in the way that you want them to, I think that oftentimes is kind of a timeline. And when Tony asked Jarris about that, he almost cracked up, because it just seemed to feel so true for him. I think he was looking back probably at this time last year and realizing that maybe he wasn't quite where he was, thought he was mentally, but how much he has grown over the past year. I think the playoff run was really big for him. Unfortunately, it ended a little prematurely, didn't get to play in the finals, turned his ankle. And then, I personally had some concerns just hearing that he didn't get back to full health until late August. And you think, well, you have a season that runs into June, and then you miss a couple of months with an injury. Does he have enough time to ramp back up? But Rick Carlisle's commentary on him was that actually he's in, I believe Rick said, far and away the best shape of his 3 years with the Pacers, which is good to see, because sometimes, an ankle injury can limit your conditioning. And from the comfortability perspective that you bring, I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's an extension of what you started to see maybe in the back half of last year, the game just slowing down for him a little bit. It was moving pretty fast, I think, his rookie year and part of his second year. But I think that started to really slow down, and I think you hope to continue to see the continuation of the game slowing down for him, which, again, with the disclaimer and everything we're talking about here, one preseason game. But one preseason game is all we have to go off of, and I thought there certainly was some evidence that appeared to be true last night.
Pat, I want you to think back to last year, okay? And listen, this sometimes what I'm about to ask you is difficult, because the years start to kind of run together, and it becomes difficult of like, wait a minute, was that last year, 2 years ago, whatever. But since we're still freshly removed from it, I want you to think about the 2024-2025 NBA season. And I want you to tell me the team from a competitive standpoint, from a consistency standpoint, from a number of wins standpoint. Don't look at the standings, but tell me the team from a year ago that you would anticipate, barring injury, that this year's Indiana Pacers will replicate. Their season this year in the regular season should look about like what we saw from who last year.
You're saying the Pacers hopefully will look like this team, what they did last year?
Correct. Correct. This year's Pacers team, no Tyrese Halliburton, no Miles Turner, obviously, but with the pieces they have, with the things they could do, then assuming that they stay healthy, you would anticipate that their year from a wins and loss and competitive standpoint would look very similar to what this team just completed last season. What franchise?
I guess the reason I'm having trouble answering that, or the reason a team isn't immediately jumping out, is I was having this conversation not on air earlier this morning. I just think there's such a high variance in what this team could accomplish when you look at it from the potential upswing side. You've got a brilliant head coach and a great coaching staff that almost is guaranteed to get, everything out of this group. And when you look at this team, even without Tyrese Halliburton and without Miles Turner, you look at them, and I at least still see a team that should be pretty good, a team that was a big reason why the Pacers were a win away from championships, even without those guys. The flip side of that, which, this can just be a big challenge, is your margin for error, I think, is a lot less. And so you can't afford a rash of injuries. And that obviously can go a long way in limiting consistency. So because of that, I think there's a high level of variance with what the Pacers could look like. I'm quite optimistic, albeit maybe a little cautiously at this point, of what they could do. But from a wins-loss perspective, I don't know if you mean that or just kind of how the team put things together.
Okay, let me give you a couple of teams from last season, and you tell me on par with, above, or below in terms. There's a reason I'm going here. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll begin with this: Chicago Bulls of a year ago.
I would like to think the Pacers are above that.
Okay. The Atlanta Hawks of a year ago.
I would also like to think they're above that.
Okay. The Memphis Grizzlies of a year ago.
Yeah, that's a tough one because they went through just so many injuries, but came out in a pretty good spot. 47 maybe wins.
48.
48, and then obviously just the gauntlet that is the Western Conference. If you're asking me if you could give the Pacers 48 wins right now, would I take it? Absolutely.
Okay. Orlando Magic of a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a decent comp maybe on where they landed, although, again, another year where they were just dismantled.
Here's the reason I mention it. Pat, I don't know if you have big, vacationing plans coming up during the holidays. Probably tough for you to do during the NBA season or at the end of the year.
Right.
And I'm not anybody. It would be irresponsible of me to sit here and tell people to gamble per se. But I'm willing to push all in on the 38.5 over-under for Indiana this year. I just think it's insane. Who is watching this group? Who is watching Obi Toppin? Who is watching T.J. McConnell? Who is watching Andrew Nembhard, Pascal Siakam, and saying to themselves, yeah, that's a 37-win team. What? I think it's ludicrous. Last night, to me, I'm looking at them going, 42-45 probably, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I will just add the asterisk for myself that I very clearly cannot give gambling advice.
Well, and I'm not
NBA.
either. I mean, listen, I'm not either. I'm just saying I think they are, and this is to shift that conversation away from that legal aspect of it. Sure. Andrew Nembhard, for example, or I think it was Aaron Nesmith, who haven't even mentioned yet. But Aaron Nesmith, I think, is one that was like, listen, we've been undersold every year. People expect less of us every single year, so we're comfortable with that. It just feels to me like a year where people are sleeping on them. I'm not saying they're going to win the East, but I think they're going to make the playoffs if they're healthy.
I think, yes, that last part is exactly what I was going to say. If they get a reasonable amount of health, no team goes through the year healthy, but if they have a reasonable amount of health and don't experience, some severe health issues, I completely agree with that. And you just look at the core of this team. I mean, we all understand how important Tyrese Halliburton is to the Pacers, and I think that the biggest thing that Tyrese Halliburton doesn't get enough credit for is the fact that every player around him, when they come here or he comes and the player's already there, they seem to have kind of a career year or a career few years. So I do think that is something to watch because all these guys have been playing so well, and I think a big part of that is just the elite level connector that Tyrese Halliburton is. That said, this group got to Game 7 of the NBA Finals not just because of Tyrese Halliburton. He had some incredible shots, had a great playoffs, but not just because of Tyrese Halliburton. It was because of their depth. And not just their depth, but how many high-level players that they could move in and move out of that top 7, top 8 rotation. And, you look at the core of guys that are still available, even without Turner and without Halliburton. You're talking about guys that were really proven players in the playoffs. Andrew Nembhard, Benedict Mathurin. Mathurin helped win the Pacers game number 3. Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam speaks for himself. Obi Toppin, T.J. McConnell, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, Johnny Furphy. I mean, you can play that game, and it's amazing that you can do this, because the last couple of years around this time, all the questions that, I got on the radio interviews that I did were, how are the Pacers going to fit all these guys into the rotation? They had 11, maybe even 12 guys who were capable of being in a rotation. Well, you still kind of got that problem because, and it's a good problem, because even with those two out, I think I just named 9 guys right there, and there's probably another guy or two, Jay Huff, Isaiah Jackson. I mean, you can get to, again, 11 or 12 guys that are probably worthy of rotational minutes. And so their depth, I think, still has the potential to be very good. I think they've lost some of their margin for error for injuries. And I think that can be, maybe the biggest challenge to this season is if the injury luck were to continue to go poorly, you just don't have, quite the depth that you did last year. But there's no question to me, and no doubt in my mind, if this team experiences a reasonable amount of health with the core they have together, it's still plenty good enough to make the playoffs. And this team the last couple of years has shown you that it's a fool's errand to put some sort of ceiling on it. You wouldn't have guessed the Pacers did what they did last year, and you wouldn't have guessed the Pacers would have done what they did the year before either.
Pat, lastly, and this is the most important question of the day, if you could get in your size of the just a pair of the shoe that any Pacer player wears, which one would you go with?
I think I should probably I will start this by saying I am not a sneakerhead, so I'm probably not the best person to ask this. But I should probably say the new Tyrese Halliburton shoe, right? So I'll pick that.
I mean, I get it. I think, and listen, I understand. I mean, there was, it was cool, the marketing promotion they did and all of that. Simply aesthetically speaking, and I think maybe part of this is just because, when I go to bed at night, I wear Aaron Nesmith pajamas because I have, he's my favorite player, right? I make no bones about it. But I think Nesmith has those New Balance that he has are extremely underrated. They're kind of a neon and light blue mixture, and we had them on, and I told him I thought they were the best shoe on the roster. And now I'm looking, and I don't think they sell them anymore. And I was late to the party. That's kind of par for the course for me.
Well, as it relates to this, I'm not even late to the party. I never got to the party, but I will pay more attention. Now, it's just something that for whatever reason it doesn't register in my brain.
No, and I'm kind of with you on that. I'm not I've never really understood the whole I'm going to buy that shoe just because my favorite player wears it guy, even though I just said that about Nesmith. I really like the shoe that he wears. I think they're cool looking. But when I go to games, I oftentimes say to the people I'm sitting with, okay, if you could pick the shoe of any guy on the floor right now, which one do you like the most? And invariably, it's more about the one that I find tolerable versus the 7 on the floor I find absurd.
You know what? I will do my best this year to keep that in the front of my mind as I'm watching these games, and hopefully get you a better answer, because this has been just a whole lot of filibustering from me. But give me a couple of months on this season, maybe even a few weeks, and I'll get you a better answer.
I think JMV likes Siakam's shoes. Eddie, who do you go with?
I don't really care. I don't pay attention. I'm not a sneakerhead.
Okay. Thanks for
participating. It's a little harder in Eddie's defense. It's a little harder in his position to see all that.
True. Very good point. That's fair. Eddie also took the day off today, Pat. So I mean that helps.
He took last night off too, so he's on a roll.
That's right. All right, Pat, we appreciate it as always, man. Look forward to talking to you over the course of the season.
Likewise, appreciate it, guys.
All right, Pat Boylan joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Now, I had mentioned, by the way, that with the Colts, Alec Pierce practicing today, but still in protocol. What exactly does that mean? And we just heard, and we're talking about Tyrese Halliburton, and then those that are coming off the Achilles, Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman, what they look like last night. When it comes to those injuries, and a unique and scary one with Kelsey Mitchell in the WNBA standpoint. Wanted to get the lowdown on all of that, and one of our favorite guests joins us to do exactly that. Ralph Reef is next. I'm telling you, I am. You are hearing the voice right now of one of the 7 people probably on Earth that, as a kid, we would have Spam. I mean, I realize now it was an economic thing for my parents, but I loved it. I love Spam. I don't think there's probably much nutritional value in anything that actually you could open a can right now that was produced in 1958 and it would still be fine, but I love it. I think it tastes good. But it's probably not the healthiest thing. I'm not totally aware. Probably not a lot of elite athletes are eating Spam, but elite athletes, when it comes time for any sort of treatment, athletically speaking, for training, would be familiar with Ralph Reef because he's been doing it since 1981. Reef Executive Performance Solutions is where he can now be found. He has organized and put together the training staff for 5 different Final Fours for U.S. Track and Field Olympic Trials, World Basketball Championships, the Olympic Games, you name it. Ralph Reef is the guy, and so he joins us once again on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line to talk about some of the different injuries that we're hearing about in sport today. Ralph, first off, welcome back. I know you were just on vacation, and it looked spectacular.
Yeah, it was absolutely wonderful. My wife and I, it was a bucket list trip to drive through the southwestern corner of Colorado, and we hit the aspen trees at their brilliance. It was really great. But hey, let's talk about Spam. So in 1980,
I love 1980,
Spam. my roommate at Miami of Ohio, I was in graduate school. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, so we would walk to the Kroger in Oxford, Ohio, and buy a couple of boxes of macaroni and cheese, which were about 79 cents a box, and we would buy the tin containers of Spam to forget the cost, but we could eat pretty efficiently on macaroni and cheese and Spam in graduate school.
Listen, so are you number 6 in terms of the fact that you will admit that you like Spam?
I ate it, and I would admit that I tolerated it and enjoyed it. We cooked it every way you could. We sliced it and grilled it. We actually baked it. We did everything you could do, Spam.
Including, and I've always, Ralph, I've always wondered when you probably just could have said, like had it sitting out, and now 45 years later, it would still be there and good, right? Along with your Twinkies. But, hey, it tasted good. And like I said, I realize now when I look back on it that my parents were playing the same economic games, right? But you do what you got to do.
That's exactly right.
I want to begin with this one because we had a scary incident that took place in the WNBA when Kelsey Mitchell goes down and who has been a great player for the Fever. And initially it was just, okay, she's got severe cramping. Then we found out, and thank goodness that they were able to get on this quickly, but it was a more complex issue than that. What exactly was it that took place?
Yeah, this was a very rare situation that occurs from within the course of competition or within practice. Rhabdomyolysis, referred to short-term as rhabdo, is it's an injury to the musculoskeletal muscles, so the skeletal muscles. Primarily occurs in the big, thick muscles of the biceps, the chest, the quadriceps, and what happens is that there's sort of 3 phases that the muscles go through from an injury standpoint. You can get cramps, muscle cramps, from lack of fluid, or they're just the muscles get fatigued and they cramp. And you're over that pretty easy. The second one is that we see often, and you've probably experienced this, getting back into training, or you finish the mini marathon and a day or 2 later you're still pretty sore. That's called delayed onset muscular soreness, DOMS, DOMS. The third level you get to is rhabdomyolysis, and rhabdomyolysis is where the cells within the muscle tissue basically explode due to intramuscular pressure, and it releases everything within the cells, and then the body responds to that as a toxin, and the body becomes very allergic, if you will, to what the proteins and the electrolytes that are pushed out into the blood system. So, Yeah, great job by Dr. Amy Corrigan, who's the team physician for them, and Todd Champlin, and to recognize that it takes a little bit of time, and because Kelsey's obviously something didn't respond right. Like I read, they gave her IV fluids, okay, and maybe that didn't take well, and all of a sudden she's still complaining or she can't function. And then it becomes pretty painful. So it typically occurs, Jake. You may, if you went in and studied it, or maybe somebody listening was a part of a training program where their strength and conditioning program took them to a level of failure or fatigue. And the muscles can get that intracellular pressure and can basically rupture, and all that fluid rushes into the bloodstream and acts as a toxic chemical to the body. So it's very dangerous.
For a patient that gets it, Ralph, is it something that typically is an anomaly, or is it unfortunately the introduction to something that can be chronic?
No, it's not a chronic condition. And I just keep thinking, how did this occur? This is really unusual because within a game, within a contest. And so you go back and you look at the level of intensity of play of Kelsey, and just from a spectator, she plays hard. I have no idea about her lifestyle. I have no idea about if she had trouble sleeping the night before. You would think, they had about 50 hours between the end of their game 4, and then they fly to Vegas, and you've got a full day off. Well, not off, but you're not playing. Sure. And so something occurred within her system, unbeknownst to her. It could have been a factor of fatigue, lack of sleep, could have been altitude, could have been from the airplane I'm talking about, and could have been a low hydration factor. Could have been a number of things that just created the perfect storm. And they're in the middle of the third period. She bails out. And it was interesting in watching the game how she sort of stopped like she was stunned and asked the official for help, because that was the closest person to her. And then she just sort of sat down. And it was odd when I saw that, but then again, they do the right thing from television view, right? They think it's dehydration, so let's go ahead and put an IV in her. Well, maybe that didn't work best at the arena, so they go to the hospital, and then they probably did some blood tests and so forth, and figured out, we've got rhabdo here. And so then it's just a matter of continuing to hydrate, nutrition, rest, recovery. There will be some period of time where she has to readjust to resistance training. But that's pretty quickly, that'll be a quick off season.
And is it possible,
let's say 90 days.
Is it possible that our weekend warriors that are on the treadmill or just, prepping for a run or just trying to stay in shape could experience this and not realize they are experiencing it, and then the body just naturally works itself through it? Or is it basically a muscular paralysis where the body says, look, hey, dum-dum, you didn't see what I'm trying to tell you here, so I'm just going to let it be known, and then you immediately have to get treatment for it?
Yeah, it's the second one. It's painful. You have a lack of control over your extremities, your large muscle groups. You might have it might be, let's say, in your biceps, and all of a sudden you've got dinosaur arms. You can't extend your arms because your bicep is contracted and in a state of shock. Okay. So it's rare, it's extreme. We like to think it should never happen, but the human body is amazing, and she'll recover. Yeah.
Okay, now let's get to, because you talk about the human body and just, it's amazing, right? Because it's a little bit, Ralph, like when you were just in Aspen and you're looking at the beauty of the leaves that are changing, right? Because what makes that tapestry so amazing is that every leaf is different. And in some cases, medically speaking, I'm not a doctor, but there are some things where every case is different. Every person and every body is different. And that's, to some extent, can be the concussion protocol. And we see with Alec Pierce where people would say, well, how do you go from concussion protocol to practicing to back into the concussion protocol? I would imagine that is one where there's kind of a last frontier there, right, of trying to navigate through what they're looking for and still a lot of uncertainty with it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there's a pretty black and white protocol within the NFL that you have to pass 5 stages. They refer to them as 5 stages. The first stage is on-field management, whether that's at practice or within a game. And so really the other 4 have to do with some type of activity. And so if he's listed as going to be in practice today, that means he's either doing sports-specific drills, which would be the 4th stage, or he would be in full contact, which would be the 5th and final stage. So if, regardless of which stage he is in, he will then have a period of time in which he will be observed, or he will self-report with, usually it's a 24-hour window. So if they practice today, they get done, let's say 4 o'clock, he's gone through full contact. Then by, tomorrow morning, they come back to the complex. Hey, how you doing? And it's not just a, hey, how you doing? And they walk by the training room door. There's protocol of evaluation. There's a baseline that he'll be compared against, and that baseline can be a neurocognitive test. It can be a balance test. It can be a visual exam. It can take a look at very technically, you can look at the eye and determine its movements on a microscopic level to see how the brain is responding to that activity. So it's a very precise protocol, and we've gotten really past the stage of relying upon the player's perception of how they feel. There are a lot of objective tests. I don't know if you remember back, I've lost track of time here, but reportedly Peyton Manning said, hey, I feel fine, right?
And I remember this. And didn't
right?
And didn't he make the wisecrack that he initially tanked the precursor test so that there would be a lower bar for him, and then people were like, whoa, wait a minute, and then he said, listen, I was being flippant about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it made a big impact on all of us in the healthcare field, believe me.
I'll bet, yeah. Ralph Reif is our guest, by the way, ralphreif.com. That's REIFF, where you can see about everything that he does, also find out the areas in which you might be able to get a hold of him with Ralph, with Reif Executive Performance Solutions. Ralph, last one would be with Tyrese Halliburton, and I know that you, and I want to make this disclaimer, you are not specifically working with or on Tyrese Halliburton, but from, an observational standpoint, with an Achilles, in terms of the update, I know we've talked to you about this before, we are now, and it's hard to believe this, probably 3.5 months or so removed from that injury. We've started to see video of him just kind of, with a little bit more freedom of range of motion. From your observation, does that appear to be basically on schedule, ahead of schedule, or even behind schedule on what we are accustomed to for that injury?
He's in a window that I would say predictable, on schedule.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and I say that going back to, all right, you have a discussion with the surgeon and the rehabilitation team to say, hey, here's our typical pattern that we see with this. And I would say, based on number of days, the injury, the surgery date, and so forth, he is in that window of predicted pace of return.
If you ever go camping out in Aspen again to take in all of the beauty now that your bucket list is complete, what's an excellent morning camping meal? Spam, just so you know, right?
Well, I've experienced all 3 meals of the day can include spam. If you dice it up and put it in that macaroni and cheese, my Lord, is that something?
Yeah.
Hey, but it never beats Java House, right?
Yes, Ralph. Yes, I love it. That's exactly correct. We'll get
and you always got to have a pod of that liquid science hydration pod with you. That
Listen,
stuff's unbelievable.
I'm telling you, and it is and it's like Spam. It's economic, right? Because it's economical because you just pour the pod in water and you're good to go, and it's easy peasy for the kids and everybody, right?
And it's recyclable.
Yeah, when Ed Carpenter and Tim Broyles, showing me that stuff at one of the races, I was like, really? It comes out of that pod? Really? And it tastes good? He says, Ralph, pour it over that ice. And I was hooked on that iced tea. And man, it is great stuff.
It is. I love it, Ralph. Absolutely love it. All right, Ralph, we appreciate it as always. We would love to have you back on. It is always good information, and I could listen to you read the phone book to me, so I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Jake.
Right. Ralph Reef joining us on the program. Really good stuff. All right, we'll come back. We'll recap a little bit on what we saw last night from the Pacers, and if you're just joining us, there is a new Colt in town. We'll explain next. Notice, by the way, when you came in today, that your pocket, like I saw something like bustling out of your pocket. I'm like, what in the world are you carrying in? I thought maybe it was a notepad or something. You're carrying a bunch of tickets, right?
Oh, yeah. Lots of tickets, Jake.
Okay, so we have some tickets to give away. This will be for what show this weekend, which is at the Old National Center, right, over at Murat?
At the Egyptian Room, yes.
Okay.
That would be David Tell, comedian David Tell. That's actually Friday.
Friday night. Okay.
Friday night at Old National Center, yes.
So just a little over 48 hours from now, if you would like to attend, the telephone number to call, and you also get the added bonus, you get to talk to Eddie at 239-1070. We have how many pair to give away, Eddie? Plenty?
Plenty.
Okay, 239-1070. If you would like to attend the show, David Tell, really funny dude, by the way, going to be right there at Old National. This is coming up on Friday. We come back, we'll get you up to speed on what's happening on West 56th with the Colts and a new addition. We'll tell you about it next. Joining us on the program, first off, thank you for doing so. My name is Jake Query, Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on the show. We call it Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Here is a recap of what we have done so far today. We talked about the fact that the Colts have a new linebacker. Now, that's partially because they had a new linebacker that is now on IR. Joe Bacci went on IR today. That news came out just after we found out that another former Bengal linebacker, Jermaine Pratt, had been joined or had been added to the Colts roster. Pratt, a third-round pick out of 2019 to Cincinnati, played there for Lou Anarumo, and then decided that he wanted out of Cincinnati. He had requested a trade. Ultimately, he ended up in Las Vegas, where he was scheduled to play here on Sunday in the Colts' big win. But Pete Carroll opting to not bring him to Indianapolis, saying that they were going, quote, in another direction. So Pratt was released, and he was signed by the Colts today. He is 29 years old. He's been a good player in the league. And at first you thought, okay, they are simply bolstering a position room that needs bolstering, and then you find out that Bacci indeed went to injured reserve. At the time that we came on the air, there was no exact clarification as to why Bacci went on injured reserve, but that is nonetheless the case. Over at the Colts complex today, Grover Stewart is practicing, so too is Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, so too is Kenny Moore, by the way. All of them practicing, but Alec Pierce remains in the concussion protocol. So in that aspect, we will see whether or not Alec Pierce returns to the field. Matt Taylor going to join us coming up at the bottom of the hour. Kyler Murray, the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals, is not practicing. He has a foot injury. Their backup is Jacoby Brissett. Arizona comes here on Sunday. We will monitor that. Last night, the Pacers getting a win in overtime in preseason game number 1. I thought they looked really good. I thought they looked offensively very efficient. They got out to at one point, I think it might have even been a 20-point lead at one point. The center position, the big area of intrigue. Isaiah Jackson, 9 minutes. He only took 2 shots, missed both. He did have a pair of points and 3 rebounds. But what you're looking for is, do these guys look healthy? Talking about Isaiah Jackson and as well James Wiseman. Wiseman also limited in his minutes, did have 4 rebounds. Jay Huff, to me, was very intriguing because he is a guy with which we are the least familiar of this trio. He did play 19 minutes, had 6 points and 3 boards. But one thing that I thought, as we talked about earlier with Pat Boylan, of Jay Huff that jumped out at me, Huff to me looked like almost like a facilitator first-minded center as opposed to a down-on-the-block center. And I really liked his ability, seemingly, to get the ball at the high post and then have vision to get to a cutter down low. And that's something that Miles Turner did very well. Not to compare everything to Miles Turner, that's unfair to do, but he was such an integral part of the Pacers' offense in terms of the flow that they had with ball movement. I thought Turner was an important piece in that, and Huff to me looked like a guy that could do exactly that. I actually last night enjoyed thoroughly. I watched the Pacers game, and I was going back and forth. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the Yankees-Blue Jays game last night, and listen.
Postseason baseball is the best.
It is, and I like the Blue Jays. When I went to Fenway earlier this summer, it was the Blue Jays they were playing. The Blue Jays were a team that I really liked as a kid in the American League. And so after I saw them, and I saw them right as they were kind of turning things around on their season, and so I started following them this year. They've got, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is a wonderful player. And, their catcher, Alejandro Kirk, I think is his name.
Yes, reminds me of myself.
Little fat guy is what he is.
Okay.
Well, I don't mean that because of you. I'm saying when
You didn't have to go that far, Jake.
but he's a good catcher.
So he's a very good defensive catcher, yes.
And but it's very amusing to watch him run out a grounder. He waddles, really, but he's a good player, very good player. last night the Blue Jays got up 6-1. Aaron Judge hit an absolute monster home run to tie it at 6, and then the roof caved in. But and then the Seattle-Detroit game was interesting because I'm watching that. There was a long rain delay. They booted that over to FS2. Do you have FS2, Eddie?
Yes.
I know I have the FS1. I don't think FS2. Is there an FS3?
No.
How many FSs do we go to?
2.
Okay. Matt Taylor going to join us bottom of the hour. Shane Steichen, speaking out on West 56th Street, had a couple of interesting things to say that I wanted to get into. One of them is this. I think any time that you walk into, especially if you are a first-time head coach, you go into an organization and you know that there is already a standard no matter where you're going. You know, if you are, name a team off the top of your head in the NFL, Eddie Garrison, go.
Chiefs.
Kansas City Chiefs. So if you're the Kansas City Chiefs in 10 years from now, you're getting your first head coaching job, you know that the gold standard is going to be Andy Reid. Maybe Marty Schottenheimer to an extent, but Andy Reid, whole different level, right? Offensively speaking, you know that that's what people are going to compare you to in Kansas City. And so you just know going into it that you kind of have that, and sometimes it's tough. Being the guy that is replacing the guy is tough. I've always felt like, for example, you know, what Purdue basketball has done is truly remarkable. And I give them all the credit in the world because they had a brilliant master plan on that transition of handing things over from Gene Cady into Matt Painter, and Matt Painter being able to put his own stamp, his own identity, and without doubt now his, you know, control and command of that program coming off of a legend. Now, a legend he played for, that helps, but a legend. Indiana, I've always felt, Indiana basketball, and people can say all they want about what they thought of him as a coach or, you know, whatever else. Indiana University basketball, I think, will always hold a huge level of gratitude towards Mike Davis because he went into the most unenviable position of all time of replacing a legend in Bob Knight and facilitating that window before then you went into what we thought was going to be the 40-year guy in Tom Crean. But for the Colts, you have to know when you come into Indianapolis to coach that the gold standard by which you're going to be measured is Tony Dungy. And Tony Dungy had a couple of things that he did that I don't know if it's unique to Tony Dungy or if every franchise does it. The Rams did not when I was in St. Louis. I know that. And that is Tony Dungy would do two things. The first is at the beginning of the year, he would break the year into quarters. And they would have literally, we'd go in the Colts locker room and they'd have up on the wall just into quarters and the 4 teams they were playing in that quarter. So, you know, right now the Colts are getting ready for what would be game 2 of their second quarter. And the other thing that Dungy did, anytime the Colts would win, you know, the last thing he would say on Sunday that you would hear him, at least publicly, to the team was like, okay, we'll see you guys on Wednesday. Because if they won, they got Monday and Tuesday off. Marvin Harrison would go back to Philly immediately. Other guys would just rest and relax, work out, whatever. But they get Tuesday off anyway. But players would always get Monday and Tuesday off after a win with the Colts. But Tony Dungy also was in a situation in Indianapolis where he saw plenty of games where his team, you knew the outcome going into the fourth quarter. And it was just salt clock, milk it away. Peyton Manning still would stay in the game more often than not, but you had to deal with how to close out games when up big. And for Shane Steichen, you love the situation that they just faced exactly that against the Raiders on Sunday. And what's interesting is you have the access, you have the ability and the resource to reach out to people like Tony Dungy to find out how to handle different situations. Shane Steichen spoke earlier today about consulting with Tony Dungy on how exactly to handle those big game blowouts late, which is a good problem to have.
You know, I talked to certain coaches. I've had long conversations with Tony Dungy about those type of things and when to take certain guys out. And those conversations have been really good. Obviously, you seek advice from guys that have done it at a high level for a long time when those situations occur. And just a lot of respect for Tony on how he sees it. And so those thoughts are going through my head during the game, too, and thinking about him and what he would do in that situation. It's been good, though. Like I said, you got to make the right call at the right time on taking certain guys out if the games are like that, which are very rare.
But it's a good problem to have when you've got to make those decisions. Part of how Indianapolis is able to extend out and get those big leads is their offense has been so efficient. And the offensive efficiency for the Colts, I think there are a number of factors. One of them is that Shane Steichen is really pushing the right buttons in knowing what works in each situation, seeing a defense and being able to say, we can get a first down on this play. We can score on this play. This guy's going to be open. And they have, for Daniel Jones, as I keep saying, Steichen and Jones have, at this point, a very symbiotic relationship where I think Steichen's comfort level in play calling and offensive command is both complemented by, cemented by, and facilitated by the style of play that Daniel Jones can play. And I think that the style of play that Daniel Jones is comfortable playing is also facilitated by and comforted by the way Shane Steichen is calling plays for him. But it helps when you have Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, when you have Michael Pittman Jr. as a big target, when you have Alec Pierce, who I know has been out on protocol but is practicing today, but when you have Alec Pierce that you can get the ball to now, incorporating it not only in the long ball situation but in short yardage situation as well. When you have Josh Downs just kind of floating around in space, and when you have, obviously, the piece that Shane Steichen talked about today, and that is the piece that I think has been the biggest difference from the Colts this year of Tyler Warren, because Tyler Warren is literally the magnet that everything has to gravitate towards. You always have to keep an eye on where he is, no matter where you line him up. A defender always has to be aware of where he is. And so in doing that, that stretches the defense out, where then Steichen can pick and choose where else Daniel Jones needs to deliver the football. He has been a catalyst, one would assume, to what the Colts want to do. Shane Steichen, your thoughts on what Tyler Warren brings to your offense?
He's an old school throwback freaking baller is what he is. The skill set's off the charts, and the way he's playing right now is physicality, understanding what we're doing, the feel for the game. Those are some things, the instincts. Those are the hardest things to find in players, because you can coach the details and fundamentals and get them better, but the really good ones that just understand it have great instincts, and that's what he's got. He's got phenomenal hands. So, yeah, it's been great to have.
Now, when Tyler Warren or that offense against the Raiders were scoring the points that allowed Shane Steichen to then have to think about and navigate exactly what he was going to do in terms of how he was going to play with a big blowout, how he was going to take players out, and etc. One guy that obviously, or one position that was not on the field was place kicker, because we now know, Spencer Schrader being hurt in that game, and they're going for two because of the fact that Rigoberto Sanchez was a capable place kicker. He did it in college. But we know now, the holder, for example, your holder is normally Rigoberto Sanchez. Then it has to become Luke Rhodes. He's your long snapper. You get this domino effect. So they go out and they get a kicker, and it's a familiar name in Michael Badgley. And Shane Steichen talked about in an open competition what it was about Badgley that caused the Colts to make that selection.
Yeah, he was very accurate. Obviously, he's had some success in this league. Obviously, a familiar face here. He's been here. I had a chance to spend 3 years with him at the Chargers. I was with him from 18 to 20. But very accurate kicker. Had a hell of a workout, so excited to have him.
I just think kicker is one, Eddie, that it is so mental. You just got to be in the flow, right? And kicker almost feels like, again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. One of the beauties of fantasy football is that I do think that or baseball or basketball, any fantasy sport, it's a fantasy, right? But it does give you an idea. And I know if I'm Rick Venturi and I'm hearing my voice right now, if I'm Shane Steichen and I'm hearing my voice right now, if I'm Rick Carlisle and I'm hearing my voice right now, any of them, I'm saying to myself, this guy is an idiot if he thinks that going on his little website fantasy team is in any way, shape, or form close to what Chad Buchanan and Kevin Pritchard and Chris Ballard and anybody else have to go through with rosters and everything else. I get it. But what I'm saying is this: we invest and we emotionally attach into our fantasy team because we so badly want to beat this team or that team or win money or have bragging rights over our buddies or whatever else. So we're looking at this roster, and you're constantly looking at like, okay, well, I know I've got a receiver that's coming up on bye or is hurt. How do I get one? I've got to go out. I could just pick one up, but then I've got to release somebody at a different position. What position do I not have need? And all of those things to say, Eddie, let me ask you this. You have how many kickers on your fantasy team?
1.
And your kicker is good or not good?
Good.
Elite or sufficient?
Elite.
And that is who?
Brendan Aubrey.
Okay. So when he is on a bye, will you release him and just pick one up, or will you have to get creative to put him on your bench, bring somebody in for a week, and then jettison him right back out?
Well, it depends on the opponent, Jake. If I'm playing you that week, then I'm fine. I don't need to pick up a kicker.
My entire team's in a mash unit. You know that, right?
Yeah, exactly. If I'm playing you this week, then I don't need to pick up a kicker. I'll be fine.
It's insane. It's ridiculous how depleted my team is. But yes, what I'm saying is most people, the kicker is the position that you're like, well, I'll just get one, ride it for a little bit.
Same with defenses.
Correct. So you get a defense, and you're like, this is great. All of a sudden now I got this great defense, and it's getting me great points. And then after 4 weeks or whatever, that plateaus out, boom, you get rid of it, you get another one in. I think with kicker, for a lot of franchises, you can, if you so chose, you can play it that way of get the guy that's the hot hand till the hot hand goes away, and then if need be, you go out and you get another one, It is the one position that feels that way.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned, though, about Badgley in terms of his length here. 5 of 13 in his career beyond 50 yards.
But and
especially in, like, the NFL today, like this
you're
season.
Right about that. But it does.
Some of these 50-yarders looks like,
I know.
40-yarders from 3 years ago.
It's amazing now.
I think it's more or less there's something different about the footballs they're kicking. They've changed the way that they're being provided.
Okay, here's what's interesting.
Because Brandon Aubrey for Dallas, Jake, I wholeheartedly believe this. Wholeheartedly. They're going to get to the end of the first half in some game this year. Dallas is going to be on their own like 48. 47, somewhere around that. And he's going to attempt a 70-yard field goal. And he'll either make it or he's going to miss it because he's going to miss left or right. He won't miss it because he's short. There's something with the footballs.
Okay, interesting point. Let me tell you. Let's go back on the Wayback Machine here. Okay? Get in your DeLorean. Fire that bad boy up. Punch in 1998. And let's go 88 miles an hour. Okay? And let me tell you something. When this bad boy hits 88, you're going to see some serious stuff, right? We're going to go back to the summer of 98 when McGuire and Sosa and Luis Gonzalez, they're all hitting 50, 55, 60 home runs. And the number one story on the news, I'm telling you.
Steroid era? Is that what you're referencing?
Yes, but hear me out. We now know what it was, but I remember this like yesterday. Maybe I'm the only one that does. And if you were around in 98 and you were watching all this, then bear with me because you're going to go, you know what? He's right. There were a gabillion stories in the summer of 98 of what in the world is going on with the home run numbers. And one of the most common things that was out there, I mean, there were stories done during the All-Star weekend and on ESPN and everything else of they went to, and I want to say it was Costa Rica, where baseballs were being made, and they were talking about they were doing a tighter wind of the baseball. The hide of the baseball was being stretched more thin, and it was more condensed, and it was causing a greater launch of the baseball. And then they're looking at in Colorado, the humidity and the air is so thin that they are now storing baseballs in certain air temperatures to dry out the ball or whatever.
Literally, it's a humidifier or a dehumidifier, one of those two.
I think it was a dehumidifier that everybody was using because there's no humidity in the air. Actually, I think they were humidifying the baseball so that then when they got out into the actual atmosphere, the baseball would react and dehumidify. I mean, all kinds of stuff. There were a gabillion stories about scientifically what was being done to the baseball, and then we found out, actually, it wasn't anything being done to the baseball. It was a consistent needling being done to the players. Now, in no way, shape, or form do I think that's the case with kickers.
Matt points us out via the text line, Jake, that kicking rules have changed. Teams are allowed to manipulate the balls and soften them.
They can use the K ball and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But I also think that a big part of it is this, a big part of it. We talked on the show earlier about how I was curious to know, and I won't know because I won't be around, 40 years from now, how are we as a culture and a society going to be in terms of our interface communications, because we are raising a group of young people now, like myself. I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but the toothpaste is out of the tube in terms of a younger generation that are so reliant on electronic device of communication that they can't understand facial expression and sarcasm and joking and all of those things. And 30 years from now, we're going to see the true across the board effect and impact of that. And I think from a kicking standpoint, while all of those things are certainly factors, one of the things as well is you are now seeing a generation that has grown up with soccer as a common household weekend little league sport that their entire life. And you didn't have that. Adam Vinatieri didn't grow up in a world where every neighborhood kid was playing soccer. But Michael Badgley presumably has. And so I think you are seeing now, Eddie, just the fact that the motion, the muscle movement, all of it that goes into place kicking is more normalized within kids athletically at a younger and more formidable age of their body than what you saw 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Of the group of kickers that are just leaving the league and being replaced by guys that have been around it forever. Yes, I mean, obviously don't they call it the K-ball, the ball that you can select to kick? I mean,
well, there are specific footballs set for kicking, and those are the K-balls, but the equipment guy or gal or whomever, the equipment person, can manipulate these footballs now. And I need to make sure I say footballs because I don't want to. If I just want to say they manipulate balls to soften them.
That's
before
that gets uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you just tuned in and you tuned into the show and you hear me reading off some guy's text about saying that you can manipulate the balls and soften them to break them in. I don't. I want to make sure I'm saying footballs here.
By the way, speaking of exactly that, this from Chris Whitlock. By the way, it was called a humidor. Yeah, in. A humidor, by the way, and
they still use the humidor.
They're great for cigars as well. And I couldn't remember if they were humidifying the baseballs or dehumidifying them. And I'm going to be actually at Coors Field Saturday night.
I love Coors Field.
Paul McCartney. I'm going to see him in Coors Field on Saturday night, so I'll see where all of the baseballs were being launched.
Beautiful park. Beautiful.
But my point being, it took me back to '98 because that was, I mean, literally there were 1,000 stories of they're doing the baseballs differently. That's why they're launching differently, and etc. I mean, it was just on and on and on with it. But you are correct now that you watch, and you'll see someone line up for like a 62-yarder, and then they show the behind the goalpost angle.
What was Cam Little's?
And you're like, man, this guy had like 8 yards to spare. It's crazy.
What was that field goal Cam Little hit in the preseason?
It wasn't 70, was it?
I thought it was.
That might be. I mean, I remember when Tom Dempsey was the gold standard, and it was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, 70 yards.
Yeah, I mean, that's just insane, man.
And here's the thing. It's not even like it barely crossed over. Like, there were another 2 yards that he could have gone back.
That's what I'm saying. Like, these guys, or they are kicking one that is so high that, like, if it's right on the goal, you're like, well, I don't know. It's way over the goalpost, so you can't even tell if it's down the middle or not. It's impressive. Matt Taylor's impressive, by the way. Voice of the Colts joins us next. Matt Taylor is the voice of the Colts. And, of course, as you just heard, he fills us in on what's happening on West 56. Brought to you by Shelby Materials. He is on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Matt, I'll begin with asking this. What's happening on West 56th?
Right now we are doing some practicing in the background here and getting ready for a Cardinals team that's coming in 2-3, and they've lost 3 in a row, heartbreaking fashion. They've lost 3 straight games, as you know, I'm sure, on last-second field goals. So they got a really good defense. Offense is kind of middling right now, and dealing with some injuries. But it's a really important week to keep on going and making sure complacency doesn't set in, and another chance to get a victory in front of the home crowd.
And one of the players that we'll be keeping an eye on, whether it be Kyler Murray, we keep an eye on a foot injury for him, the playmaker for the Cardinals at quarterback. Jacoby Brissett would be his backup if Murray can't go. One of those that would have been keeping an eye on that would be the linebacker Joe Bacci for the Colts. The announcement earlier today that he goes to IR. Matt, has there been any clarification on what that injury was?
No, I'm kind of wondering that too. I mean, they said undisclosed, so I mean we'll find out perhaps more coming up on Friday when Shane Steichen meets with the media again before the game on Sunday. But yeah, that one, I mean, went from going on, I should say, having an injury to going on IR. Obviously had kind of an up and down game last week with the penalties and. He had the big holding call on the kickoff return on the 98-yarder that would have been on the return by Ashton Doolin. But so they bring in Jermaine Pratt, and that's kind of a mystery too because Pratt, played basically every snap the week before for the Raiders in their loss to the Bears, and then didn't make that trip. They came out early, I understand, on Friday. To get ready for that game last week at Lucas Oil Stadium, and he didn't make the trip, and so that one's kind of curious as to what's going on there. Why didn't he make the trip? They said it was for personal reasons, and then being picked up by the Colts today. It's kind of a mystery on 3 different levels. The third phase of that is who's going to play linebacker next to Zaire Franklin. It's been kind of a revolving cast of players at that position this year. I mean, Chad Muma's played some. Austin Ejike, Cameron McGrone, who's no longer on the team. I think that's one of the few spots on defense that they're still trying to figure out and solidify, that will linebacker spot next to Zaire Franklin.
And Matt, we've talked about this before, but I want you to opine on it. Is we talk about offensive line a lot in terms of, you and I have had this discussion, the fact that I just think it's a position where continuity and understanding of tendency of the guy lined up next to you is so important, right? So sometimes it's hard to just airdrop in a lineman, right? Because so much of it is reliant on cohesiveness. Would you put linebacker in that same category, or is it a unit where no matter who you put in there, Zaire Franklin, they're not as reliant on tendency of what's happening next to them?
No, I think it is important. I think Zaire Franklin's played enough football. He almost has 100 games in the NFL and, close to around 70 starts. So he's played enough football to be instinctual that no matter who you're going to put him next to, he's still going to be productive. But, I do think there is something to, when that defense was humming back in the day and they had 2 healthy linebackers and Zaire Franklin and Shaq Leonard, I mean, they just fed off each other. And I think it's important to know who you're playing next to in the middle of that defense, because I think instinctually in the back of your mind, when you can maybe take a chance, right? Maybe when you can, go inside a block, not that you're taught to do that, but like, hey, if you get into a bind, maybe you go inside a block when you're not supposed to because that you can trust that the guy next to you, he's going to be in the right place, right? I mean, sometimes it's about setting the edge, and sometimes it's about forcing things back into the rest of that defense. Maybe it's, you're being sent on a blitz and you can trust that, if this guy, leaves his position, I got you covered and vice versa. So I do think it's important. I think offensive line and linebacker is one of those positions where you need continuity and trust and, just a lot of experience playing next to one another. So, that's the biggest thing the Colts are still looking for because, like I said, it's been, a different cast of characters seemingly every week. And it's not even just week by week. It's like down by down, series by series, where, you're just trying to, from my perspective, you're looking at who's in the game and scanning the field, and seemingly, every other play, there's a different linebacker in next to Zaire Franklin based on the situation of the game.
One of the things where I feel for you is it'd be nice for you if one of these guys, one of these days, they could just sign like Bill Smith, right? Like they got some tricky names in there for you, right? They throw you some curveballs, man.
Well, the Raiders had a bunch too. I mean, they had some guys brought up off the practice squad that played a lot on Sunday. A guy that was brought up off the practice squad Saturday. And thankfully, I kind of had familiar with him was Albert Akue-Bunam, who's a tight end. He was actually with the Colts for a couple of weeks during training camp before they started playing preseason games. So, you and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, the game is way more international now, and every team has.
If you can play, they're going to find you, man.
That's it. And you got to stay on top of your phonetics, if you will, because each team has 5 or 6 guys that they've got some tough syllable pronunciation, and they play, and they're going to make a difference, and it's your job to try to get it right.
Matt, you've seen the movie The Hangover, right? Obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Matt Taylor, our guest, the voice of the Colts. When I went to go see The Hangover, I knew nothing about it going in. I was on a family vacation. Everybody else was doing something else. I'm like, I'm going to go to a movie. And I went to the theater, and I knew nothing about this movie. And I'm watching it, and as the movie's going on, part of the fun of it was just, I was like, man, I knew nothing about this, and it's just this nonstop thrill ride of just the next scene was more fun than the first, right? And that's
I'll be your Doug.
And that's what makes it great, right? Exactly, right? Like, hey, man, I'll be your Doug, right? So having said that, tell me the movie that fits into that for you. Tell me a movie that you went into it and you knew nothing about it, and then the whole time you're just going, man, I don't know how I didn't know about this, but this is great.
Like, you want me to give you a movie or a Colts player that fits that?
Well, so there's a reason I'm going with that, because we'll
right.
skip the movie portion of it, right? Well, give me the movie. Give me the movie.
Well, I was really young. I think I was probably like 7 or 8, and I'm sure it was like in the dog days of the summer, when your mom's like ready to pull her hair out and kick you out of the house, waiting for school to start. So one day she packs us up and we go to the movies, and you're supposed to, like, when your mom takes you to the movie theater, you're supposed to go see a kids movie.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think she was just like so frustrated, like, I got to get out of the house, and you guys are coming with me, and we're just going to go see a movie. I think that's what it was. So we go see, again, I'm very young, but I remember it distinctly because I don't remember anything about, like, hearing about this movie before it. But we go see A League of Our Own. And I knew it was a baseball movie, but I didn't know anything about it. And, it's still one of my favorite movies to this day because of that story, like, going in blind, didn't know anything about it, and it still resonates, still hits, to this day. Tom Hanks, one of his best movies ever.
It is a great movie, for sure, filmed in southern Indiana. Okay, so having said that, is the Daniel Jones Colts season right now exactly that? In the fact that you're sitting there and you're going, I had no idea it was going to go this way. I had no idea it was going to be this enjoyable, but I'm just going to sit back right now and enjoy what's taking place because this is a pleasant surprise where each scene seemingly is better than the one before it.
Man, Jake, you couldn't have put it any better. I mean, what you're getting right now out of Daniel Jones, even the most optimistic Daniel Jones supporters could not have seen this coming. I mean, the NFL put out a stat, I think it was last night, and it's just amazing. Like, you look at all, and the reason why it's astonishing is because the Colts do not beat themselves. They're absolute playmakers in all the different aspects of the offense. They don't beat themselves, and when there's a play to be made, they're just making the play.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that just speaks to that is the league put this out last night. So when you add up punts and giveaways and sacks taken, so if you were to combine all 3 of those numbers so far this year, again, punts, giveaways, and time sacked for the Colts, those 3 numbers add up to only 14 for the entire season. That is the fewest amount or the fewest total in the NFL through 5 games by any team since 1950. So, I mean, it's better than the 2005 Colts. It's better than the 2007 Patriots. It's better than any year that the Saints got off to with Drew Brees. And you're doing it with the guy that was signed in March and everybody in New York was upset over, and he's a free agent and a cast-off guy, and that's what's fascinating about it. Is like, this isn't supposed to be happening, but it's career resurgence from a guy who's a total pro, and you pair him with a mastermind like Shane Steichen, and that's what I said about this team all off season. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that I forecast that they'd score 40 points in 2 games and have the best point differential at 74 through 5 games. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you on that. But what I will say that I was kind of right about is that even with that defense last year, right, he was up and down a season ago, even with all of that stuff going on that side of the ball, if you just had a little bit more consistent quarterback play last year, that was a playoff team. And not only are you getting consistent quarterback play this year, you're getting maybe the best quarterback play through 5 games. He leads the NFL in QBR. He's 3rd in passing and yards per attempt and all of this stuff. So it's sort of unfair that one guy makes such a big difference, but it's so true. And, he's one of the biggest leaders on this team. And I think he's one of the biggest factors as to why, the culture and the atmosphere inside the locker room is as seemingly healthy as it is so far.
Which is a more true statement? Shane Steichen is able to call a vast number of plays because of the versatility of Daniel Jones, or Daniel Jones is able to execute things offensively because of the brilliant play calling and the keeping it within limitation of his strengths and weaknesses by Shane Steichen?
That's a good one. I think they're both probably true. And I asked Shane on Monday night on our Colts Roundtable live show, I was trying to get something out of him, but of course, he always says the right thing. I said, like, how much in the zone are you as a play caller? Because it's like, it's not all of a sudden Shane Steichen became, this great coach overnight. No, I mean, he has a guy that is, perfect for this offense and is putting in the work and is so high football IQ intelligent and knows how to get the Colts into good plays and out of bad plays at the line of scrimmage. I said, would you, if you were to just trust Daniel Jones to call the plays at the line of scrimmage, how often do you think he would call what you had in mind? He's like, well, probably a lot, maybe more than you think, because I think they are that on the same page and they are thinking that much alike. And, Shane always talks about how he's getting text messages from Daniel at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday or Thursday or vice versa. And, like, I heard there was a report, in the locker room after the game where they won by 34 stinking points, and they're in the locker room after the game sitting at Daniel's locker stall, and they're going over game situations, like just talking ball still, like, hey, in the second quarter we got this and we missed it. Next time we see, X, we're going to do Y. I mean, that's just how those two guys are and how they're wired. And, it just seems like through 5 games, just a perfect marriage for, how the potential for this offense, because, the same core of guys that you have this year have been here for the last couple of years. Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs and, all the offensive line with Quentin Nelson and Bernard Ryman and Braden Smith. The potential has always been there. It's just fun to see them reach it with, a quarterback that, has a chip on his shoulder and is just playing at an extraordinary high level right now.
Matt, of course, if you listen to the show, we have a text line, 317-239-1070. This one just came across the wire a little bit ago. Hey, I'm Matt Taylor's neighbor on the south side. Tell him his yard is nice, but if he needs my edger, I'll bring it by.
Well, which neighbor is it?
Did not identify which neighbor.
Oh, well, come on now. Are they saying I need to edge? I need to have better edging, better lines here?
I don't know if you, Matt, here's the thing. You could talk to Chris Ballard. He's been trying to find a better edge for like 3 years now, right?
Well, As it relates to my yard, I have I don't know if I should admit this, but once training camp starts, I don't do anything in the yard. The yard gets neglected.
I think that's fairly excusable, right? You're a little tied up, right? Your weekends are fairly busy, right?
I don't do any more yard work. I just write that check and
let's see this guy carry Lanier, and I'll send her up and down the floor all day.
Maybe you just need to ask this neighbor.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I need to know which neighbor it is. Is it Dave? Is it Craig? Is it Bill? I need to know because they're all great guys and they all could lend a hand. Come on now.
And you'd love to have their name at linebacker. That'd be great, right? Hey,
if they could, I'm telling you, you don't want Craig at linebacker. I'll tell you that.
Apparently, Craig just likes
Craig,
to.
But Craig's like 5'10", 180 pounds.
Craig also likes to apparently sit on the sidelines and coach from there and just tell everybody how to do it. Matt, lastly, I'll say this, and I think this will make sense. I have come to the conclusion that the reason Daniel Jones should be a Colts fan's one of their favorite players is because of the fact that it's really hard to determine why it is that he's your favorite player. There's like nothing about him that jumps out where you go, he does this outstanding. He just literally, seemingly, is a guy that doesn't care about that, puts the bag over his shoulder, goes out and just does what needs to be done, and then goes home, right?
Well, I think that's sort of, if there are any more critics nationally, and I think the one component to any critic's arsenal or ammo is that the schedule, right? I mean, hey, okay, you're beating the crap out of Miami and Tennessee and the Raiders. You know, those teams are combined 3-12, and I get it, right? While that's true, it's one thing to have victories over those teams. It's one thing to just beat the holy blank out of them, like the Colts are doing, and that's hard to do. Like, I mean, it's hard to beat a team by almost 40 points, and the Colts have done that. They have 3 wins over 20 on the season. That hadn't happened to them as a franchise. They haven't experienced that since 2021. So it's hard. Like every spread in the NFL, as you guys know, is like a high one is like 7 points.
If it's 7.5, you're like, man, what a blowout, right? Yeah, no question.
Yeah, 100%. So, I think Daniel Jones just is mastering right now of just making unbelievably good decisions. Like I can't stress that enough. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, that the Colts just aren't beating themselves. Like that is such an underrated part of football because especially in the NFL, way more games are lost than won. And, the one loss this year for the Colts, well, guess what happened? They beat themselves. So, it's hard to be as perfect as they have been consistently in 4 out of 5 games. And it's just Daniel Jones not putting the ball in harm's way, knowing where to go with the football. He's been incredibly decisive. I mean, if you just watch the film, it's 3-step drop, boom, ball's out. Know exactly where to go with it. And he's putting it on the money. The ball placement is fantastic. It's Sunday level accurate. And it's not all him. If you do want to downplay Daniel Jones and say, well, he's just the point guard of the offense, you're right. It's absolutely right. I mean,
dare I say at this point, in a league of his own. See what I did there, man? See what I did there, right? Yeah, I thought you were going to say your mom took you to go see Porky's, but nonetheless. All right, Matt Taylor will be on the call this Sunday. Colts and Cardinals. We'll be listening to it. Matt, appreciate the time as always, man.
You got it. Have a great rest of the week, guys.
All right, Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts. Greg Rakestraw is in. He'll be in for John. We will find out what he's got cooking, and we'll do it next. Not by design at all, because we always enjoy talking to Greg Rakestraw for copious amounts of time. But on this crossover brought to you by Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, and 317-353-2141, the telephone number. The perfect time of year to begin a look at your furnace, maybe get that checked and running. But simply, we will ask Greg, for the sake of brevity and up against the clock, what you have lined up on the big show next, Greg.
Zach Osterman, 3:30. Kevin Bowen, 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock, Charles Arbuckle. 5:30, Jeremiah Johnson. There you go.
Sounds like you are going to cover some college football, some Colts, and some Pacers as well. Greg will carry you home, and we will hand it off to him. We thank you for listening to Query & Company.